A disgruntled passenger spots a large service dog boarding his flight, rolling his eyes and loudly demanding its removal. Yet when the plane takes off and the dog settles next to a calm, intimidating figure with an FBI badge, the complainer is left speechless. What unfolds next reveals a hidden depth that no one on the plane could have foreseen. Airport chaos buzzed through the terminal gates, footsteps echoing on the polished floors, muffled announcements crackling over the PA system. Among the sea of weary travelers, Martin trudged to gate B7, shoulders tense from a business trip gone sour. He grumbled about every minor inconvenience, from long security lines to the cost of a coffee. His mood soured further when he noticed a German shepherd, wearing a service vest, waiting in line to board the very flight he'd be on. "Just great," Martin muttered, rolling his eyes at the dog's presence. In his opinion, having an animal on a plane was a nuisance, especially a large one. The dog's handler, a petite woman with a calm expression, was explaining something to the gate attendant. Martin caught snatches of conversation involving medical alert or special clearance. Irritation spiked in him at the notion of sharing limited cabin space with a furry passenger, no matter how well trained. When boarding began, Martin lingered near the front, hoping to stow his carry-on without issue. Yet he couldn't stop shooting annoyed glances at the dog stepping carefully down the aisle. Passengers parted with polite curiosity, some cooing at the shepherd. Martin, scowling, plopped into his seat, determined to ignore the fuss. But his frustration only grew when the dog settled in the same row, occupying the footspace of the next seat. "This is ridiculous," Martin huffed to a flight attendant, loud enough for nearby travelers to hear. "Is this even allowed? I paid good money for this seat." The dog's handler opened her mouth to respond, but before she could, a firm voice cut in from behind. "Is there a problem?" Martin turned and froze. Looming over him stood a tall, quietly formidable man wearing a neat suit, an ID lanyard visible under his jacket. The emblem read FBI. Eyes narrowed. The agent calmly repeated, "Any issue with the dog?" The entire row went silent, tension crackling like static. No one expected an FBI agent on this commercial flight, let alone siding with the dog's presence. In that moment, Martin realized a single complaint might not only embarrass him, but also unravel a chain of revelations about the dog's critical role, and the unwavering reason the FBI agent vouched for it. Over the course of this hour-long flight, a simple seat dispute would evolve into a profound lesson in loyalty, empathy, and the surprising ways hidden heroes can change lives, even at 30,000 feet. Martin tried to mask his shock as the tall FBI agent slid into the aisle seat beside him. The large German shepherd, now half settled near the window, drew curious glances from nearby passengers. The dog's handler, a calm, petite woman, placed her carry-on in the overhead compartment, her demeanor radiating quiet assurance. Martin's irritation flickered. He had expected the flight attendant to scold the dog's presence or reassign seats. Instead, he found himself wedged between an unexpected federal agent and a service dog, with no recourse to complain further without looking foolish. As the plane taxied out of the gate, an awkward hush loomed. The dog's handler remained polite but distant, focusing on securing the dog's harness and checking something on her phone. Martin's frustration simmered just under the surface. He thought about making a snide comment about allergies or the dog's size, but a glance at the FBI agent's unwavering expression made him hold his tongue. Something in the agent's posture, erect, confident, suggested a no-nonsense attitude. And the small emblem on his ID lanyard reading K9 Specialist stirred Martin's unease. At takeoff, the cabin lights dimmed slightly. Martin found himself half-pressed to the side by the FBI agent's broad shoulders. He tried focusing on the in-flight safety announcements, but the dog's quiet panting caught his ear. He shot another annoyed look, only to see the dog's calm brown eyes gazing back, curious rather than menacing. Martin swallowed. Could it sense his hostility? Once the plane reached cruising altitude, the seatbelt sign dinged off. The dog's handler unclipped a small pouch from the shepherd's vest, retrieving treats. Martin couldn't keep silent. "Is that dog official or something?" he muttered, voice tinged with sarcasm. The woman met his gaze squarely, though her tone remained poised. She's a service animal, yes? I'm with the Bureau's support unit. The FBI agent, overhearing, turned slightly. We handle specialized canine tasks, he added, patting the dog's flank. Olivia here, he nodded at the handler, has medical reasons for traveling with the dog, plus the dog doubles as an alert dog for specialized missions. Martin blinked, disarmed by the matter-of-fact explanation. Specialized missions? On a commercial flight? The agent offered a thin-lipped smile. We do what's necessary, even if it means traveling among civilians. The dog's ears twitched at the subtle tension. Behind them, a flight attendant approached. Martin assumed, fleetingly, that his earlier complaints might have prompted a follow-up. Instead, she politely leaned toward Olivia, asking if the dog needed water or any immediate care. Olivia thanked her but declined, mentioning they'd prepared adequately for the flight. The attendant offered a polite smile to Martin, then stepped away. Martin realized his attempt to lodge a complaint earlier hadn't gained traction, likely overshadowed by the FBI agent's involvement. He stifled a resentful sigh. In the row behind, a woman with a toddler stretched to see the dog. "Oh, what a beautiful dog," she cooed. The child in her lap squealed with delight. For a moment, the dog wagged its tail gently at the attention. Olivia softly signaled for it to remain calm. The toddler's squeals turned to giggles, stirring a wave of friendly chuckles from nearby passengers. Martin felt a pang of embarrassment. Here he was, the only one seemingly bothered by the dog's presence, while others found it endearing. Half an hour into the flight, the FBI agent folded his arms, leaning back. Martin, still feeling overshadowed, mustered enough courage to inquire, "So is the dog some kind of bomb sniffer, or you're, like, carrying out an operation on a plane?" His tone dripped with unintended sarcasm, but also curiosity. The agent eyed him neutrally. "Not exactly. She's trained for multiple tasks, medical alert, therapy support, and evidence detection if needed. She's also been recognized for, well, let's just say she's an integral part of our team," Olivia added quietly. "Her presence can help me manage certain conditions, PTSD, for instance. Plus, the Bureau has us traveling for an ongoing case. That's all we can say." Hearing the mention of PTSD softened Martin's frustration slightly. He recalled stories of veterans or agents dealing with trauma. A flicker of guilt tugged at him. Maybe the dog's presence wasn't just a convenience or a nuisance, but a real necessity. At one point, the shepherd stirred, rising to its feet, ears perking. It pressed its nose to Olivia's thigh, letting out a soft whine. Concern flickered in Olivia's eyes. She stroked the dog, rummaging in a side pouch for medication. Martin watched in fascinated confusion. "Everything okay?" he blurted, despite himself. The agent nodded calmly, though his posture tensed. "She's alerting. Our colleague here has certain triggers or stress markers. The dog picks it up early." Sure enough, Olivia took a small pill, exhaling a shaky breath. The wave of tension melted from her face. The dog settled back down, resting its chin on her lap protectively. Witnessing that quiet act of service, a dog detecting subtle shifts in a human's stress or health, chipped away at Martin's prejudice. He realized the dog wasn't just an accessory or a hamper to other passengers' comfort. It was a lifeline, bridging invisible struggles. That realization pressed a flush of shame into Martin's cheeks. He recalled his outburst and recognized how misguided it was, but he still wrestled with resentment that an entire row seemed overshadowed by the dog's bulk, that he had lost the freedom to sprawl or store his carry-on easily. The contradiction churned inside him. Throughout the flight, Martin observed the dog's impeccable manners. No barking, no wandering. It shifted quietly at Olivia's feet, only rousing to nudge her at intervals. The FBI agent occasionally patted its flank, murmuring, "Good girl," his tone unexpectedly gentle for such a stern man. Passengers who rose to use the lavatory or pass by gave the dog warm glances, some snapping discreet photos. Martin noticed overhead that the seatbelt sign beeped, signaling mild turbulence. While Martin tensed at the plane's shudder, the dog remained calm, exhaling a steadying presence that even comforted the toddler behind them. By the flight's midpoint, the tension Martin initially carried had eased into a complicated mixture of curiosity. lingering annoyance at the cramped seat, and grudging respect. He began to see the dog as more than an obstacle to his comfort. It was a caretaker, a partner to these federal workers, and a vital link to something bigger. Just how big he wouldn't understand until the flight encountered an unexpected twist that pulled the entire cabin into deeper revelations. A test that would highlight the dog's unwavering mission and transform Martin's perspective forever. 30 minutes into the flight, Martin realized he'd been discreetly observing the German Shepherd more than he cared to admit. Each time the dog made a gentle movement or let out a tiny huff, he'd flick his eyes over, half expecting it to cause some disturbance. Yet it remained impeccably still, content to doze or rest its muzzle on its handler's lap. The woman, Olivia, if he recalled, occasionally stroked the dog's ears, her other hand gripping the armrest as the plane hit a mild patch of turbulence. Martin's initial annoyance at losing seat space gradually mutated into a simmer of curiosity. He stole glances at the FBI agent, whose broad shoulders practically overflowed into the aisle, and at Olivia, who seemed far less tense whenever the dog pressed against her. Martin couldn't help but wonder about her mention of PTSD. Was she ex-military? Law enforcement? The polished FBI badge around the agent's neck certainly suggested something more complex at play than a routine flight. The flight attendants rolled a beverage cart down the aisle, pausing at each row. When they reached their row, Martin shifted awkwardly. Uncertain if the dog would lunge at the sudden intrusion, instead, it lifted its head with mild interest, then settled. The flight attendant offered Olivia some water, which she accepted gratefully, slipping a few pieces of ice into her palm for the shepherd to lick. Martin noticed a flicker of a smile pass between them, like a small ritual they'd done many times. All the while, the FBI agent said little. He typed occasionally on his phone, face impassive. Martin could feel a subtle tension radiating from him, a readiness, maybe. The man was polite enough, but something in his posture suggested he wasn't a chatty traveler. Still, Martin's curiosity about the dog and its purpose gnawed at him. At last, he mustered the nerve to speak. "So, you, do this kind of traveling often?" He tried not to sound too flippant. The agent glanced up, eyes cool but not hostile. "Often enough. Training events, missions, protective detail. The Bureau sometimes requires presence in different states." A beat passed. "You heading for business or home?" Martin shrugged. "Business, though it's mostly done. I'm just going back. I was expecting a quieter flight, if you know what I mean." He managed a wry grin, attempting to lighten the mood. The agent's mouth curved slightly, as if acknowledging Martin's prior frustration. "I assure you, the dog's presence is to help, not hinder." He left it at that. Martin felt a prickle of guilt again. He remembered how he nearly caused a scene complaining about the dog's seat. Now he saw the large shepherd blink docilely, as if bored by the hum of the engines. The dog's harness had small pouches, some bearing patches that read "Service Animal" and "PTSD Alert." He recalled Olivia saying the dog performed multiple tasks. Another patch, smaller, read "FBI K9. It stoked Martin's fascination. A dog that served the Bureau in multiple capacities. That was beyond typical service dog training. Eventually, Martin's mind drifted to a half doze. Turbulence gently rocked the plane. Over the in-flight speaker, the pilot announced they might experience a bumpy patch for the next 10 minutes. Passengers stirred, some gripping armrests, others yawning from the monotony. Martin glimpsed the dog adjusting, bracing gently against Olivia's legs. The agent frowned, scanning the overhead compartments, as if verifying nothing would dislodge. Suddenly, an unexpected beep rang out, a sharp, insistent electronic chirp. Not the usual seatbelt sign or the flight attendant call. Heads turned. Confusion rippled through the cabin. Olivia startled upright, exchanging a tense look with the FBI agent. The dog, roused, stiffened. Then Martin realized the beep was coming from the dog's harness pocket. Olivia dug into the harness quickly, retrieving a small device the size of a pager, its screen flashing red. Her face blanched. The FBI agent leaned in, voice low. "Check it." Martin caught a glimpse of cryptic text flickering on the device, something about scent trigger and alert. Martin's heart pounded. What was happening? Passengers near them looked alarmed. The flight attendant hurried over. "Ma'am, is everything all right?" The agent rose slightly, speaking quietly but firmly. "We need a moment, please." His authoritative tone made the attendant step back, though concern etched her features. Meanwhile, Olivia pressed a button on the device. The shepherd let out a low, uneasy rumble, shifting stance as if ready for some action. Turning to Martin, perhaps feeling obligated to explain, the agent said in a clipped tone, "This dog is also trained to detect certain substances, explosives, narcotics, both physically and, in some advanced tests, even chemical markers that might indicate a threat." He paused in scanning the cabin. "That beep means the dog or its sensors picked up a potential signal. Could be a false alarm, but we don't ignore it." Martin's mouth went dry. "On the plane, you're saying it might have detected something dangerous?" The agent nodded grimly, posture taut. Olivia slipped out of her seat, whispering to the dog. The shepherd focused, tail lowering in a sign of readiness. Within seconds, the agent signaled an alarmed flight attendant to hush, promising no panic if they could quietly investigate. Martin sat stunned. He realized the dog's presence wasn't just about comforting Olivia's PTSD. It was an advanced K9 specialized in threat detection. Passengers along the aisle noticed the commotion. Murmurs spread. The shepherd, guided by Olivia, began sniffing the aisle, moving row by row. The agent calmly addressed a startled flight attendant, requesting discreet cooperation. Meanwhile, Martin's pulse hammered. The dull flight had escalated into potential danger. Was there a bomb, or contraband, or was it truly a false alarm? Glancing around, Martin noticed how fear began to radiate in the seats around them. People fiddled with seatbelts, some half rising to see what the dog was doing. The agent shot them a level stare, urging quiet. Martin found himself unconsciously wishing he hadn't complained about the dog earlier. Who knew it might be about to save the entire plane? The plane rattled once more from turbulence, intensifying the sense of unease. The shepherd sniffed with methodical intensity, occasionally pausing at someone's bag or feet. Each pause made hearts leap. The agent followed, in silent command. If the dog discovered something, how would they handle it mid-air? Martin's mind raced with doomsday scenarios. He felt the hush of the cabin press in, every sense hyper-alert. In that fraught hush, a wave of regret and humility crashed into him. He realized, and with savage clarity, that the dog he'd seen only as an inconvenience might be the sole shield between these passengers and a hidden threat. The hush in the cabin deepened as the dog methodically sniffed seat after seat, guided by Olivia's gentle commands. Passengers watched with bated breath. Even the flight attendants hovered near the galley, eyeing the process with mingled fear and confusion. The FBI agent, his stance formidable, stood a few rows behind the shepherd, scanning everyone's reactions for any sign of guilt or alarm. Martin, pinned in his seat by a potent mix of shame and apprehension, felt his pulse pounding in his ears. Near row 18, the German shepherd slowed, nostrils flaring. It paused beside a middle seat where a nervous-looking man in a rumpled hoodie sat fiddling with his tray table. The dog stiffened, tail lowering, letting out a low, urgent whine. Olivia knelt beside it, eyes locked on the man's carry-on stowed under the seat. The hush escalated. The man paled, stammering, "Why, what are you doing? Dog's got the wrong seat. I'm not—" The FBI agent signaled for calm. Approaching the man, he lowered his voice. "Sir, please stand and let us check your bag." The man's cheeks reddened. He tried to protest, but the agent's unwavering stare and the dog's pointed fixation left little room for argument. Passengers in adjacent rows craned their necks, hearts hammering at this potential meltdown. The flight attendants discreetly alerted the cockpit. The man stood shakily, bag in hand. Sweating, he unzipped it under the agent's direction. Tension soared as the dog's muzzle inched closer. Martin watched from his row, feeling both horrified and relieved it wasn't him. He glimpsed the contents: clothing, a phone charger, random personal items. Then, tucked in an interior pocket, the agent withdrew a small, foil-wrapped packet. The dog let out a sharper bark, tail stiff with confirmation. The man's protest burst out. "It's just some medicinal stuff. I've got a prescription." But the agent's expression hardened, and the dog's unwavering stance suggested otherwise. The agent's voice, measured but cold, "We have reason to believe this contraband might contain an illegal substance. We'll verify." The man paled further, stuttering that it was for personal use, no danger to the plane. Passengers around them exhaled pent-up air, some whispering confusion. Martin realized with a jolt, the dog's advanced sensors or training must have flagged the chemical traces. This might not be an explosive, but it was still contraband. The tension that had soared to near catastrophic levels eased marginally, replaced by a hush of relief. Olivia led the dog back a few steps, letting the FBI agent handle the awkward mid-flight bust. Some watchers sighed, others glared at the man for causing a scare. Martin, hands clamped on his armrests, felt a wave of embarrassment at how he'd earlier maligned the dog. The flight attendant nearest the scene used the intercom to request calm, announcing that there was no safety threat. Nonetheless, nerves were rattled, and adrenaline still buzzed in the cabin's air. The contraband, though not an explosive, confirmed the dog's significance. The suspect, face burning with shame, offered half-hearted protests. The agent, who introduced himself simply as Agent Clark, informed the man quietly that an investigation awaited him upon landing. They'd let the flight continue, provided he remained seated and cooperative. Passengers broke into murmurs. Some clapped softly, impressed by the dog's detection skill, though the moment felt too tense for real applause. The row behind Martin engaged in hushed speculation. Did that guy really have something illegal? That dog's incredible. Martin overheard, nodding inwardly at their sentiments. The nightmarish possibility of an actual bomb scenario had flickered and receded, yet it left behind a sobering hush. The German Shepherd had validated its presence in a single dramatic moment. Yet while the dog's detection alleviated one concern, it introduced another puzzle. Why was an FBI K9 so thoroughly scanning the plane for even minor contraband? Typically, such tasks fell to airport security pre-boarding. The dog's intense stare and specialized gear suggested a deeper mission. Could it be that Agent Clark and Olivia had intelligence about a bigger threat? Martin recalled the dog's device that beeped an alert. Perhaps it was meant for explosives or chemical weapons, but it locked onto smaller contraband. Still, the tension in the agent's posture suggested the case wasn't closed. In a low conversation with Olivia, the agent murmured, "Was that the only alert? Or is there another reading?" She glanced at the small sensor device, shaking her head uncertainly. It flickered again, but it might be residual. "We'll keep the dog ready." The dog, panting softly, eyed the aisle like it expected to continue searching. Martin, eavesdropping, realized the dog might still suspect something. The contraband find could be merely the first whiff. A chill ran down his spine. Could there be an even bigger threat aboard? In the aftermath, the flight pressed on and time crept. The suspect, subdued and sullen, remained under watch by the agent in row 18. The Shepherd resumed its seat near Olivia in row 12, leaving Martin once more next to the quiet FBI agent. A flight attendant offered water or snacks, trying to quell the cabin's edginess. Some travelers looked relieved, praising the dog. Others felt unsettled, as if something else might loom. Martin found his irritation replaced by a complex swirl of admiration and regret. He recalled how he'd complained about the dog's presence. Now, seeing it in action, he acknowledged how vital it was, not merely for Olivia's therapy, but for the plane's safety. Despite the relief, an undercurrent of tension remained, a sense that the dog's job might not be over. The agent, reading a text on his phone, tensed. He whispered something to Olivia, who straightened. The dog's ears rose, reflecting their heightened alert. Martin's chest tightened. He realized the plane still had a couple of hours before landing. If the dog's sensor device beeped again, or if some other threat lay undiscovered, what would happen? He forced himself not to panic. But the wave of possibilities, someone with ill intent, a hidden threat bigger than small contraband, set him on edge. Thus, the first major twist concluded. The dog uncovered a passenger's wrongdoing, validating its presence and underscoring the FBI's vigilance. Yet the sense of resolution felt incomplete. overshadowed by the dog's uncertain second reading and the agent's unsettled posture. The next phase of the flight promised deeper conflict. Would the dog's instincts reveal a far graver danger, forcing an in-air confrontation that tested every passenger's courage and assumptions? Martin braced himself for a ride far more turbulent than any weather could provide. The aisle lights glowed faintly as the flight continued in subdued tension. Nearby passengers, who had witnessed the dog's sudden alert and the discovery of contraband, cast glances toward row 18, where the man now sat under the FBI agent's discreet watch. Though relieved it wasn't a larger threat, many wondered if the dog's job was done or if there was more to uncover. For Martin, the shift from mild annoyance to cautious respect left him feeling unsettled. The plane felt smaller, each face more vivid, as though anything could happen. Some travelers resumed reading or dozing, deciding the drama was over. But the hush in row 12, where Olivia and the shepherd had returned, remained thick with unspoken questions. Martin, pinned in the middle seat, stole glances at the dog which occasionally sniffed the air, brow furrowed. The swirling hum of engines and subdued chatter made every beep or click stand out. Even a flight attendant's usual routine seemed overshadowed by the memory of that contraband bust. Up ahead, the suspect in row 18 occasionally peered over his shoulder, sweat beading on his temple. He seemed more embarrassed than anything, fidgeting, possibly anxious about a legal scolding upon landing. Meanwhile, the FBI agent stood in the aisle near him, exchanging low words with a flight attendant. Martin couldn't catch the conversation, but guessed it involved secure handling of the suspect or contacting airport authorities. Olivia, the dog's handler, leaned back with eyes closed for a moment, perhaps recentering herself. The dog turned its muzzle to rest on her knee. Martin noticed how she stroked the shepherd's ears in a specific pattern. 1, 2, 3 slow rubs, then a pause. It seemed a private signal, reassurance between them. He recalled that the dog also provided her with PTSD support. The stress of the flight, the in-air confrontation, and the dog's multiple roles must weigh heavily on her. Yet her posture remained steady, each breath measured. After a beat, she noticed Martin's gaze and offered a small, weary smile. "You doing okay there?" she asked gently. Her tone, though polite, held a note of subdued tension, as if bracing for him to complain again. Martin cleared his throat. "Better than I was," he admitted softly. "I appreciate what your dog did. I didn't realize how specialized it was." The corner of her mouth twitched, a flicker of gratitude. "She's saved lives before," Olivia said, resting a hand on the dog's harness. "I trust her instincts more than my own sometimes." Moments later, the FBI agent Clark returned from the back, carefully stepping around the shepherd. He addressed Olivia in a low voice. "Authorities on the ground have been notified about the suspect in row 18. No further contraband signals so far, but remain vigilant." At that, the dog perked its ears, as if understanding. Clark nodded at Martin, acknowledging him with a curt nod that lacked the earlier tension. "We appreciate your patience, sir," he said, surprising Martin with the courtesy. Martin, feeling guilt prickle, offered a tight smile. "No problem, just glad the dog's here to keep us safe." The flight attendant made another pass with the beverage cart. This time, a few passengers took the opportunity to drop words of thanks or curiosity at row 12, praising the dog's skill. Some asked quietly if it was a bomb dog or if they were in danger. Olivia reassured them in a calm tone. "We're not in immediate danger. The dog found what it needed. We'll handle the rest upon landing." Martin noticed how each mention of the dog's heroics made the shepherd wag its tail a fraction, tail taps on the airplane floor. Pride radiated from its posture, yet it maintained discipline, not seeking further attention. Martin felt another wave of respect. Behind the sense of relief, however, Martin gleaned a subtle current of fear. The man in row 18 was presumably not a major threat if he only carried a small stash of contraband. But the dog's sensor had beeped a second time. Clark had said it might be residual or a glitch, but Martin suspected they were all half expecting a fresh beep at any second. The dog's every head tilt made hearts skip a beat. Overcome by the strangeness of his own 180-degree turn, Martin decided to break the ice further. "I owe you an apology," he said, voice pitched low so only Olivia and the dog could hear. I was upset about the dog's seat and everything earlier. Didn't realize the full picture." The corners of Olivia's mouth curved kindly. "I understand," she replied. "Service dogs can be inconvenient in tight quarters, but they have a purpose." Martin nodded, a quiet laugh escaping him. Understatement of the year, considering it just found Contraband mid-flight. He paused, eyeing the dog, that sense of wonder swirling again. "Thank you, really." The dog blinked, offering a short wag in response to his tone, as though accepting his contrition. Relief fluttered in Martin's chest. Some invisible tension he'd carried since boarding dissipated. The flight still had over an hour left. The suspect stayed pinned in his seat. The FBI agent remained watchful. Olivia petted the shepherd, occasionally checking the sensor device hidden in a side pocket. No fresh alerts. Yet Martin sensed the entire cabin remain on subtle high alert. If the dog rose again, sniffing or beeping, the tension would skyrocket. Each overhead announcement or ding of the seatbelt sign quickened pulses momentarily until it proved benign. Meanwhile, the plane's windows revealed only darkness streaked by occasional city lights below. The hum of the engines lulled some passengers to half sleep, content that the crisis had passed. But Martin felt they stood on a precipice, as though the dog's presence hinted at deeper layers. The specter of possible threats overshadowed the lull. He realized that any instant something else could trigger the dog's high-level instincts. Perhaps Contraband wasn't the only thing on board. Thus, with a tenuous calm re-established, the confrontation over seat space and the Contraband discovery led the entire cabin to reassess the dog's real value. Martin, once a harsh critic, now silently championed the shepherd's presence. Passengers, lulled but watchful, awaited the final leg of this flight, uncertain if the next minutes would pass quietly or if the dog's devotion would be tested further. That hush, thick with possibility, set the stage for a deeper revelation or conflict, one that might truly define the flight's outcome, and Martin's final transformation from skeptic to believer. Tension in the cabin settled into an uneasy calm after the German shepherd discovered Contraband in a fellow passenger's bag. Though no larger threat emerged, the air felt thick with the possibility that the dog's advanced sensor system might pick up something else. Passengers resumed their reading or napping, but glances toward row 12, the seat of Olivia and her K9, remained frequent. Martin found himself in a peculiar mental place, part relieved, part apprehensive, uncertain if the flight was truly out of danger. In row 18, the suspect sat, arms folded, occasionally shooting angry or anxious glares forward. He was pinned under the quiet vigilance of the FBI agent, who had identified himself as Clark. Occasionally, the suspect's hushed protests filtered up the aisle. "This is overkill, I wasn't harming anyone." Each time, Clark calmly reminded him he'd face thorough questioning upon landing. The presence of a subdued guard felt surreal on a commercial flight, spiking the curiosity of nearby travelers who glimpsed the tension. Martin noticed how the suspect would occasionally mutter about his rights or claim the dog had singled him out unfairly. That resentment might brew trouble, especially if the flight encountered more turbulence or a drawn-out delay. The agent, stoic, seemed to sense the man's building frustration, occasionally offering a clipped reassurance that "we'll handle this calmly once on the ground." But a powder keg vibe clung to row 18, overshadowing the suspect's sense of humiliation and fear. As if on cue, the pilot's voice crackled over the intercom about upcoming weather patterns. "Folks, we're expecting moderate turbulence for the next 20 minutes. Please remain seated with seatbelts fastened." Groans and uneasy shifts rippled through the passengers. Martin, feeling his nerves fray again, attempted to quell his fear by focusing on the dog's calm. The shepherd, noticing the shift in the plane's movement, braced slightly against Olivia's legs. Olivia offered it a comforting pat, her own expression taut. Some passengers eyed the dog and agent warily, wondering if a second bust or revelation might erupt mid-turbulence. The flight attendants scurried to secure carts and trays, while overhead bins rattled ominously. In the midst of these jitters, Martin realized how reliant he'd become on the dog's presence to keep him anchored. If the dog remained unalarmed, maybe things were stable. Strange how quickly he'd pivoted from annoyance to trust in the K9's instincts. A sudden beep from the dog's harness device startled Martin again, but this time it wasn't the sensor for Contraband. It was the medical alert function. Olivia inhaled sharply, rummaging in the side pouch for medication. The dog whined, pressing close. Martin, scanning her pale face, realized she might be experiencing a wave of anxiety or a small PTSD trigger. She swallowed pills quickly, shutting her eyes for a few deep breaths. The dog exhaled softly, muzzle on her knee. Despite the mild chaos of turbulence, this small bubble of caretaker-canine synergy shone as an example of why the dog was so essential to her well-being. Martin, half wanting to help, asked, "You okay?" She nodded, forcing a tiny smile. "Just what we train for. The dog senses my stress spikes. I'm fine." The FBI agent, returning from checking on row 18, paused to ensure Olivia was stable. His posture signaled a mixture of professional concern and personal care. Martin recognized these two likely had a deeper bond, colleagues or friends long accustomed to working in tense environments with the K9's support. While the plane rocked gently, the dog's harness beeped once more, quiet, almost hesitant. Olivia and the agent froze, exchanging sharp looks. Passengers who noticed stiffened. Martin felt his stomach twist. Was this a residual glitch or another detection? The dog perked its ears, but didn't stand or posture toward any new location. Olivia fiddled with the device, eyebrows furrowing. After a tense moment, she exhaled, flashing the screen to the agent. "Possibly leftover data from earlier," she murmured. "No fresh target." Relief flickered in Clark's expression. They both resumed calm, yet the beep's echo lingered in Martin's mind. Meanwhile, a wave of subdued appreciation for the dog spread among other passengers. A gray-haired woman across the aisle kept passing kind remarks, telling stories of how a relative's therapy dog once saved them from a panic attack. Another man, once stony-faced at boarding, nodded approvingly at the shepherd, whispering to Martin, "I wasn't big on dogs on planes, but after seeing that Contraband bust, I'm rethinking." Even the flight attendant, who had fielded Martin's earlier complaints, offered a friendly wave to the dog, occasionally checking on Olivia. The sense of community within this flight soared above typical anonymity. People recognized they were sharing an extraordinary journey with an extraordinary dog. Martin, absorbing that shift, felt less lonely in his own emotional swirl. He realized the dog had ironically unified them more than it had caused any inconvenience. Between the mild turbulence, the suspect's resentful presence, the dog's harness beeping, and Olivia's medical stress, the flight's calm teetered on a knife point. Martin couldn't help suspecting that at any moment, a new wave of tension might crash over them, be it from the suspect lashing out, a hidden threat the dog might still detect, or an escalating medical episode. The plane, after all, was only an hour from its destination, but an hour could be an eternity if troubles surfaced. He glanced at the dog once more, marveling at how it sat so composed, unwavering in its job, guarding, sensing, comforting. Olivia gently laid a hand on Martin's arm in a brief gesture of reassurance, seeming to sense his swirling thoughts. "We're almost through," she murmured, referencing both the turbulence and the unsettled mood. Martin nodded, swallowing dryness in his throat. Perhaps so, but the synergy of subplots around them, a suspect simmering with resentment, a medical alert dog possibly picking up extra signals, an FBI agent on constant watch, hinted that the next hour might well push them all to a final confrontation or deeper crisis before the flight touched down safely. With each press of overhead pressure changes, Martin braced, quietly hoping the plane's real storm had passed. Yet the hush of the cabin, peppered by worried glances and whispered hushes, told him they might still face a culminating moment. The dog, in its silent vigilance, seemed prepared for anything, and Martin, once so critical, found himself unexpectedly rooting for the K9 to stand guard. Whatever might happen, the dog was there to protect them from threats seen and unseen, a living shield of loyalty that soared above his petty complaints from earlier, forging a new sense of reverence in every heart that recognized its watchful eyes. The gentle hum of the engines droned in the background as the flight pressed onward, still hovering with tension. With roughly an hour left, the plane's interior felt both weary and on edge. Some passengers had drifted into uneasy naps, but Martin, Olivia, and the German Shepherd remained very much alert. Even the FBI agent, Agent Clark, stood frequently, checking on the subdued suspect in row 18, as if anticipating a sudden outburst. As time inched forward, the contraband-carrying passenger grew restless. A short exchange of words drifted up the aisle. "This is harassment. I have rights," he hissed at Clark, who responded calmly each time. Other passengers whispered among themselves. Frustration spilled from the man's posture, occasionally glancing back at Olivia's row in silent blame. Though Martin couldn't hear every word, the sour tension was palpable. The large dog had sniffed him out, exposing his secret, effectively altering his life's trajectory. The suspect's fear and anger churned, and Martin wondered if it might boil over. "Stay calm," Clark repeated in a measured tone. "Upon landing, we'll handle this smoothly. Resist and it escalates." The man pursed his lips, sullen but still seated. The unpredictability, though, clung to the air, like a fuse waiting to be lit. Meanwhile, Olivia was not immune to the undercurrent of stress. The dog's advanced sensor device beeped again for her medical alert, less intense this time, yet still enough for her to fumble for a pill. Martin's brows furrowed. "Is it the altitude or something else?" he asked softly, genuine concern seeping into his voice. She gave a shaky half-smile. "Crowds, tension, memories of past incidents," she murmured. "The dog helps me keep grounded. She senses my panic before it peaks." A wave of empathy washed over Martin, intensifying his regret for how he'd initially judged the dog's presence. In that closeness, he recognized the dog's unwavering attention whenever Olivia's breath quickened or her hands shook. The canine would nudge her gently, and she'd breathe deeper, focusing on the canine's reassuring presence. It was a living demonstration of how service animals truly transform their handlers' ability to function in public spaces, like a protective shield for hidden wounds. Despite the relative calm, Agent Clark exuded tension. A phone call from the cockpit, relayed by a flight attendant, alerted him that the pilot had coordinated with airport law enforcement. Clark replied stiffly that they'd land soon, under watchful eyes. Martin overheard bits. "Yes, the suspect remains compliant. No, we're not forcibly restraining him unless needed." That official, clipped tone underscored how any misstep could spark chaos. The dog's presence seemed to reassure the agent, but also reminded him of a deeper vow. They served a mission bigger than a single contraband bust. Possibly, they were relocating the dog for a broader FBI assignment or fulfilling a specialized task. Martin noted the lines of fatigue bracketing the agent's mouth, a testament to how emotionally draining these journeys could be. Around them, the cluster of watchers who initially found the dog intriguing now regarded it with near admiration. One older man even reached over to tap Martin's shoulder. "Hey, earlier you seemed upset about the dog. You still feel that way?" he asked quietly. A flush warmed Martin's cheeks. "No, I've realized how crucial it is," he admitted, glancing at the shepherd. "I was ignorant. Actually, I'm relieved it's here." The older man nodded approvingly, lips curving in a faint grin, as though acknowledging Martin's growth. In the row behind, a mother quietly doled out snacks to her kids, whose stares never left the shepherd. "Mommy, that dog's a hero, right?" the older child whispered, and the mother nodded, eyes filled with wonder. Word of the earlier contraband detection had circulated, forging a new respect for the canine's skill. The dog, mostly oblivious to the chatter, lay calmly with its chin on its paws, loyal eyes scanning the cabin for the slightest sign of trouble. Suddenly, the seatbelt sign chimed again, and the plane lurched slightly in renewed turbulence. A fearful murmur passed through the cabin. The suspect in row 18 clutched the armrests, pressing lips tight. Agent Clark maintained a watchful stance, bracing against the seat back. The dog stirred, glancing at Olivia, who inhaled deeply, shutting her eyes to center herself. Martin found his own heart jolt with each dip of the aircraft, but a quick glance at the dog's steadfast calm grounded him. In those shaky minutes, the shepherd's presence felt profoundly stabilizing, like a living anchor for the entire row. Martin realized with fresh clarity that while the dog's official tasks were manifold, its intangible effect on morale was immeasurable. If the plane encountered a bigger emergency, how many more would take comfort from this service dog's unshakable composure? As the turbulence waned, the in-flight announcement teased they'd begin descending in about 30 minutes. The hush in the cabin thickened. Everyone wanted this flight over, yet the final half-hour often drags, especially under tension. Martin felt the dog's tail lightly tap his foot in a slow wag, as though even it sensed the end was near. Yet lingering questions hovered. Would the suspect remain compliant upon landing or lash out? Was the dog truly finished, or might its sensor beep again, revealing a deeper threat? And how would life continue after they touched ground? Would Olivia and the agent vanish into the swirl of the FBI? Would the dog's heroism fade from memory? These complexities signaled an emotional journey heading for a final apex, some last push that might test the dog, the suspect, and Martin's newly reformed view. And as the plane sank lower through cloud cover, the intangible tension crackled like static, warning that the final 30 minutes might hold one more test of loyalty, empathy, and quiet bravery. The dog's posture, half-lifted ears, suggested it, too, was poised, ready to respond if fate demanded. Lightning flashed beyond the aircraft window, illuminating the darkening sky as the plane commenced its descent. The captain's voice crackled overhead, confirming they were on final approach, warning passengers to remain seated with seatbelts secured. Yet despite the usual end-of-flight routine, a subtle dread permeated the cabin. The suspect in row 18 clenched the armrests, anxiety etched across his features as the FBI agent observed him from an adjacent seat. Meanwhile, the German shepherd lay near row 12, tail swishing slowly, eyes on Olivia. Martin, in the same row, felt every shift in the dog's posture, every flick of its ears, fueling a sense that something else might still unfold. Just as the fasten seatbelt sign dinged once more, a faint beep emanated from the dog's harness device. Olivia tensed, hand hovering over it. Passengers near them froze. After the contraband discovery, even a quiet beep implied fresh alarm. The dog raised its head, ears fully perked, muzzle pointing toward the aisle. A murmur swept the rows. Had the sensor picked up a second target? Martin's stomach churned. He saw Agent Clark stand abruptly, leaning over the seat behind the suspect's row. For a moment, the agent's expression flashed with stern urgency. "Stay calm," he ordered. The plane's overhead lights flickered with a slight turbulence bounce, intensifying the sense of unease. Martin watched Olivia and the shepherd exchange a glance, woman and dog locked in silent communication. She adjusted the sensor device, scanning the screen. "Could be residual," she murmured, "or something new." Anxiety thickened in her voice, as if triggered by the mounting tension. The suspect in row 18 shifted violently. "Enough of this," he hissed, voice hoarse. He half rose, ignoring the seatbelt sign. Agent Clark placed a firm hand on the man's shoulder, urging him down. The suspect's face reddened. "Your dog humiliated me. I'm no terrorist. Let me off this plane." His outburst drew frightened looks. Some passengers cowered, fearful that a physical scuffle might break out in these cramped quarters. Clark's posture turned rigid. "Sir, remain seated. We'll land in minutes. Resisting will only worsen your situation." The suspect's eyes darted left and right, sweat beading on his brow. For a second, Martin feared the man might try to run for the aisle. The flight attendants, pinned near the front galley, exchanged anxious whispers. The cabin crew's standard protocols offered little help for an in-air confrontation with a suspect under federal watch. While the suspect spat defiant words at Clark, the shepherd gave a low growl and rose to its feet. Olivia knelt beside it, noticing how its nostrils flared, muzzle aimed not at the suspect, but at the overhead bins behind him. This nuance told Martin something else was at play. The dog's harness beep repeated, sharper than before. A ripple of alarm traveled through the watchers. Martin found himself gripping the edge of his seat. Was there another piece of contraband stashed overhead? Clara, one of the flight attendants, tiptoed closer, eyes darting between the dog and the overhead bins. "Agent, there's a passenger's roller bag up there," she whispered. "We've had no reason to suspect it, but—" Her voice trailed off. Indeed, the dog's unwavering focus suggested that bag. Clark nodded solemnly. "We'll check. But we must be cautious. Plane's descending." He pressed his phone to his ear, presumably contacting the pilot or some ground authority. Meanwhile, Olivia steadied the dog, who sniffed the air intensely. The suspect, feeling overshadowed by the dog's renewed attention on something else, stood abruptly. "I'm telling you, I'm not your biggest problem here," he snapped, frustration fueling his bravado. The plane dipped slightly from turbulence, jostling him off balance. Agent Clark signaled him harshly to sit. "We're not ignoring you, sir," he said, voice carrying an edge, "but there may be another matter." The passenger's eyes widened, then darted to the overhead bin. Realizing the dog's suspicion might shift blame away from him, a twisted sense of relief flickered in his gaze. Yet the tension soared. No one was certain if the dog's beep indicated real danger or a false alarm. With the cabin due to land soon, Clark and the flight attendant made a snap decision. "We can't force an evacuation mid-air," Clark muttered. "Let me see that bag discreetly." He reached overhead, carefully unlatching the bin. Passengers in nearby rows shrank back, some leaning away, bracing as though expecting an explosion. The dog remained poised, letting out a soft growl as the bin opened. Inside, a roller bag rested among others. The dog's harness beep quickened, confirming that particular item. With deft efficiency, Clark unzipped the bag's front pouch, wincing at each jolt of turbulence. He rummaged cautiously, gloved hands rummaging among clothes, personal items. The hush was deafening. Even the suspect sat stock still, eyes locked on the agent's search. After a moment, Clark paused, pulling out a small, sealed canister. A hush of horror rippled through the watchers. The dog's whine escalated. Olivia exhaled softly. "What is that chemical?" Martin's breath froze. The label was partially scratched off, but the canister's shape and the dog's urgent beep indicated it might contain a dangerous substance, some advanced chemical or toxin. A few passengers gasped, clearly frightened. This overshadowed any petty contraband the suspect had carried. Clark's face hardened. "We need specialized testing," he murmured, placing it in a secure bag. No clear instructions. Could be benign or it could be something harmful. He snapped the overhead bin shut. The dog's beep subsided a fraction, like it recognized the item was isolated. Martin exhaled in shaky relief, yet fear coiled in his belly. They were still in the air with a potential toxic or explosive item discovered. The pilot must be notified. Clark quietly demanded the flight attendant speak to the cockpit. The dog, posture unwavering, pressed its muzzle to Olivia's knee, as though ready for further instructions. In that tension-laden hush, the entire plane reeled. 2 discovered items on one flight. The suspect glared, sullen, but evidently not involved with the second bag. Passengers stared wide-eyed. The reality that an unknown chemical was traveling above their heads hammered home how essential the K9's presence was. The final approach now bristled with new intrigue. How would the plane land safely, secure the chemical, and handle the suspect all at once? Martin's heart hammered. He realized that if not for the dog, they might never have known about this second item until it was too late. A wave of gratitude and humility saturated him. Next to him, the dog settled, harness device quieting. But the tension soared anew, promising that the last minutes of flight might become the most critical test of the dog's calm vigilance and everyone else's nerve before they touched down, hopefully unscathed. A stunned silence washed over the cabin as Agent Clark discreetly pocketed the mysterious canister for safekeeping, confirming with a nod to Olivia and the German Shepherd. The plane was already descending, making any immediate in-air remedy impossible. No emergency landing was requested, yet tension sizzled in the recycled air. Passengers tried to maintain calm, but hushed speculation spread. First contraband from a jittery passenger, now an unclaimed chemical stash in the overhead bin. What else could lie hidden in these cramped rows? Those who witnessed the second discovery exchanged worried glances. A middle-aged woman clutched her child's hand, whispering reassurance. Another man fidgeted with his seatbelt, openly fearful. The flight attendants carried on with a veneer of routine, though their eyes betrayed unease. Whispers drifted. "Is the plane safe? What was in that canister?" Martin, seated by Olivia and the shepherd, felt the same pulse of panic in his chest. Yet seeing the dog remain steady, muzzle resting on Olivia's lap, gave him a thin thread of composure. The shepherd's presence, ironically, had caused Martin such annoyance earlier. Now it formed the only bulwark against total meltdown. He found himself wanting to stand up and tell passengers, "It's okay, we have a dog trained to detect these things. We'll be fine." But he stayed quiet, uncertain if that reassurance might be official. Instead, he caught Olivia's eye. She offered a faint, determined smile, as if reading his mind. Even as Olivia reassured the dog with soft rubs behind its ears, a flicker of strain etched her face. The beep from the harness device lingered in her mind. Did it confirm the canister alone, or was there more? Each time the plane jolted in mild turbulence, she flinched, knuckles whitening on the armrest. Her free hand tested the sensor's readout again, though it remained silent for now. The unpredictability of what might be inside that canister weighed heavily, especially knowing her own PTSD triggers could flare if any confrontation escalated. Still, the dog's unwavering closeness acted like an anchor. Agent Clark, returning from a brief talk with the cockpit, confirmed they'd continue the final descent as scheduled. He quietly told Olivia that local airport police were fully mobilized. "They'll board as soon as we land. This entire row may need deplaning last for a thorough check." She nodded, exchanging a look of silent synergy with him. Their job demanded calm in chaos. Meanwhile, Martin overheard snatches, the gloom in Clark's tone feeding his sense that the real challenge might explode on the ground. Near row 18, the suspect, who had earlier displayed anger and defiance, seemed to lose some aggression. Perhaps the second discovery overshadowed his contraband bust, giving him twisted relief. Martin saw him flick worried glances at the overhead bin. Fear of a bigger fiasco cooled his rebellious streak. He slumped low in his seat, arms folded, as if steeling himself for inevitable arrest upon landing. The FBI agent's posture stayed watchful, prepared in case the suspect tried a last-minute escape or meltdown. In a surprising moment, the suspect actually mumbled to the agent, "Was that stuff in the overhead some terror thing? 'Cause I swear I had no part in that." The agent offered a brusque nod, acknowledging the suspect's statement. "I understand. It's unconnected. But we'll sort it all out on the ground." A hush followed. Martin, half listening, felt a slight empathy for the suspect's fear. The plane had turned into a microcosm of tension, each occupant uncertain of what final twist might land them in deeper trouble. The final approach soon triggered the pilot's voice overhead. "We'll touch down in approximately 10 minutes. Flight crew, prepare the cabin." The typical shuffle of seatbacks, tray tables, and overhead compartments was overshadowed by hush. Flight attendants told everyone to remain seated until law enforcement gave an all-clear. Some passengers looked pale, suspecting the presence of the canister might demand immediate isolation. Children whined for the restroom, but flight attendants requested they wait. Even a passing glance from the large shepherd, now upright and scanning, made some anxious. The dog sniffed the air, muzzle pointed at no one in particular, just re-verifying no fresh signals. Up front, a single overhead bin rattled from the mild shaking. Martin glimpsed a flight attendant giving it a worried look, but no beep emerged from the dog's sensor. Everyone prayed no third discovery would appear last minute. Martin clenched the arms of his seat, noting the dryness in his mouth. He recalled how only an hour earlier, the dog uncovered that contraband from a tense passenger. Then the canister's revelation hammered home that the dog was these travelers' hidden guardian. Now, in the plane's final minutes of descent, each moment felt stretched, as though fate might still intervene. As the plane lowered through cloud cover, the cabin lights flickered. The city lights below glowed in luminous grids, approaching fast. Overhead compartments rattled slightly, seatbelts locked. Martin felt the dog shift beside him, sensing the shift in altitude. The woman across the aisle, once enthralled by the shepherd, now squeezed her eyes shut, knuckles white with landing anxiety. Another wave of mild turbulence jolted them. In those final minutes, Martin recognized a hidden synergy. The plane's passengers, from the suspect to the families, from the unsettled to the calm, had become reluctant allies in a single, extraordinary flight. The dog, bridging tension with its silent vigilance, overshadowed Martin's earlier resentments. Even the suspect seemed subdued by the looming question: would the landing unfold smoothly, or would some final spark of trouble escalate? The hush of the engine changes signaled the landing gear deploying. The flight attendants took their seats, breath shallow. Agent Clark settled into row 18, ensuring the suspect couldn't bolt. Olivia braced with the dog in row 12, sensor device in hand. Martin Howe in the middle seat closed his eyes, a swirl of fear and gratitude spinning in his mind. The next minutes, as tires touched runway, would decide if they truly escaped the flight's undercurrents unscathed, or if they faced a conclusive test of the dog's unwavering devotion and every passenger's composure. The aircraft's wheels touched the runway with a thump, a collective gasp echoing through the cabin as the plane jolted and roared in deceleration. Rain dotted the windows, streaking across the lights of the runway, and flashes of lightning still danced in the distance. Everyone remained seated at the flight crew's request. No one wanted to risk an incident with the FBI agent on guard, a subdued suspect in row 18, and an unknown chemical canister hidden away. Martin gripped the edge of his seat, glancing at Olivia and her German shepherd. The dog, harness beep silent, stood calmly in the aisle seat's footwell, bracing for the landing's momentum. Olivia exhaled shakily, relief mixing with lingering anxiety. In the row behind, a child whimpered, "Are we safe now, Mommy?" Her mother whispered reassurances, eyeing the large dog with gratitude. As the plane slowed, Agent Clark rose, phone in hand, sending a quick text or call. The suspect, and clammy-faced, sniped, "You're overreacting. It's just a stupid canister. Might be harmless chemicals." But no one listened. The dog's reliability overshadowed any illusions that it might be harmless. Even Martin, once the dog's critic, found himself mentally urging the cabin to trust the shepherd's instincts once more if needed. "Ladies and gentlemen," the lead flight attendant announced over the intercom, voice carefully measured, "please remain seated until law enforcement boards the plane. Do not retrieve your carry-ons yet." A wave of confusion rippled among passengers, some frowning, others sighing heavily. The usual mad rush to overhead bins at landing was denied. Martin understood the need. With a suspect under watch and a suspicious canister stowed with the FBI, chaos had to be minimized. Outside, the plane taxied to a remote part of the airport tarmac, not the typical gate. Through the window, Martin glimpsed flashing blue and red lights. Airport police or some specialized response team. Anxiety spiked in his gut. If the dog was correct about the canister, an entire specialized unit might investigate. The suspect sank in his seat, cursing under his breath. Tension mounted with each passing minute. At last, the engines wound down. Several uniformed officers, accompanied by 2 airport security staff, appeared outside the plane's window, bounding up a portable stairway. In the aisle, Agent Clark conferred quietly with Olivia. The shepherd pressed to her side. Passengers craned their necks, uncertain whether to fear a bomb squad or a forced evacuation. A mother clutched her toddler. The teen behind Martin mumbled about going viral with this wild flight. Martin inhaled, shoulders tight. This was likely the final confrontation that would determine how the story ended. The cabin door hissed open. In stepped an officer in a bulletproof vest, scanning the rows. Another followed, calmly addressing the flight attendant. Clark stepped forward, showing his badge. A low conversation ensued about the suspect with Contraband and the unidentified chemical container. The shepherd's role was briefly mentioned, prompting wide-eyed surprise from the officers that a canine had discovered so much mid-flight. They prepared for a careful removal of suspect and evidence. Just as 2 officers advanced toward row 18, tension erupted. The suspect jolted upright, voice taut with desperation. "Don't treat me like a terrorist," he barked, ignoring repeated orders to stay seated. In a split second, Martin saw the man's posture turn frantic, eyes darting from the kneeling officers to the front exit, as though he might bolt or lash out. Agent Clark lunged forward, barking, "Stay where you are!" Passengers gasped, and Martin half rose from his seat in alarm. The suspect tried to shove past an officer, adrenaline surging, but the dog, alerted by the scuffle, sprang down the aisle, ignoring Olivia's half-uttered command to hold. This was a serious breach of quiet compliance the suspect had given earlier. In a swirl of limbs, the suspect found himself pinned by the dog's formidable presence and the officer's firm grip. The suspect yelled in a mix of fear and outrage. Gasps rippled among passengers as the dog growled low, not an attack, but a deterrent that froze the man's aggression. Stunned hush followed. Several seatmates scrambled to let the officers through. The suspect, now trembling in genuine terror of the dog, slumped, ceasing resistance. One officer swiftly cuffed him, while Agent Clark gave a curt nod to Olivia. She signaled the shepherd to back off. The dog retreated obediently, returning to her side with tension in its posture. Martin felt his heart hammering, the scene surreal, a dramatic arrest in the narrow aisle, the dog's silent intimidation serving as the final straw preventing real violence. Passengers breathed out a collective sigh, some letting out shaky applause. The threat, though small, felt tangible. Someone had tried to defy federal orders mid-flight, stirring primal fear in an already anxious cabin. Now subdued, the suspect collapsed into a seat near the door, wrists bound, while officers read him his rights. Martin's mind whirled. It wasn't a massive terrorist plot, but it was enough to spark pandemonium, if not for the dog's intervention. In the aftermath, the flight attendant reopened the overhead compartments for passengers not tied to the investigation. People stood, retrieving luggage with uneasy glances. The paramedics arrived to examine the suspect's condition, while a bomb squad officer gingerly accepted the canister from Agent Clark. The dog stood by Olivia's side, tail wagging slowly as though proud of a job well done. Martin exhaled a wave of relief. He realized how, as in the span of a single flight, the shepherd had uncovered contraband, identified a suspicious chemical item, and prevented a violent confrontation. Hardly the nuisance Martin once complained about. Officer Clark, turning to Olivia, gave a subdued smile. "Good work, both of you. The Bureau owes you thanks again." Olivia nodded, kneeling to stroke the dog's ears. The flight attendants, seeing the suspect escorted off in cuffs, hesitantly instructed passengers to disembark by rows. Applause rippled in pockets, a spontaneous gesture of gratitude to the K9, the agent, and the staff. Even Martin clapped softly, heart still racing. As the final confrontation ended, Martin rose from his seat, meeting Olivia's weary but kind gaze. "Guess this proves your dog is indispensable," he said, voice tremoring with leftover adrenaline. Olivia's mouth quirked in a small grin. "I'd say you were pretty indispensable too, not freaking out this time." Martin let out a half laugh, shoulders sagging. He felt a new kinship with her, and with that remarkable shepherd. The plane's crises had reached a crescendo, but the final resolution still hung: how the dog's heroism, the contraband fiasco, and the discovered canister would shape their stories beyond the landing. The flight's literal touchdown merged with the emotional landing of the cabin's ordeal. Now came the deplaning, the official statements, and a swirl of revelations in the airport terminal. And for Martin, the dog's once irritating presence had become the flight's greatest shield, forging a memory he'd never forget. A quiet K9, an unstoppable loyalty, and the lessons humility brings when a crisis tears down shallow assumptions. Outside, rain still peppered the tarmac as the flight crew assisted passengers in deplaning. However, a cluster of travelers, including Martin, Olivia, and the German shepherd, remained under instruction near the cockpit. Agent Clark stood beside them, awaiting final clearance from airport security. The suspect, now cuffed and escorted off the aircraft, had triggered enough alarm that multiple officers in dark uniforms milled around, speaking into radios. The discovered chemical canister was whisked away for urgent testing. Passengers who had already disembarked shot curious glances through the terminal windows. Word of the dog's heroism spread quickly among them, stirring pockets of conversation. Some typed fervently on phones, presumably capturing the story for social media. The flight attendants, though exhausted, maintained order, politely steering curious passers-by away. The tension from mid-flight lingered in the air. Relief, but also a sense that further revelations awaited. Martin hovered close to Olivia. "Will we be questioned too?" he asked, voice hushed. She nodded. "Most likely. They'll need statements. It won't take long, just official procedure." The dog, calm once more, sat at Olivia's feet, tail gently sweeping the floor. Each time an officer came within a few feet, they'd offer the shepherd a respectful nod or a light pat. The dog's reputation had soared among law enforcement in that short flight, it seemed. A short uniformed officer carrying a sealed container approached Agent Clark. "Preliminary tests suggest the canister was not explosive," she said, pitch hush. "But it might be hazardous materials or chemicals unfit for transport. We'll know more after a thorough lab test." A sigh of relief flickered across Clark's face. "So no bomb," he confirmed, glancing at Olivia, who exhaled. The dog, picking up their eased tension, let out a soft huff, seemingly satisfied. Yet the fact that suspicious chemicals had flown under the radar of normal screening underscored the dog's value once again. Agent Clark tapped away on his phone, presumably updating superiors. Then he turned to Olivia and the shepherd. "We'll need your official report for the Bureau, possibly a local briefing. This flight's events aren't trivial." Olivia offered a crisp nod, her posture rigid with training. Martin, in the background, tried to remain discreet, suspecting he was just a civilian overshadowed by a swirl of federal protocols. Yet Clark pinned Martin with a coolly polite look. "You too, sir. We'd appreciate any eyewitness statement, especially about the early confrontation with the suspect and your vantage on the dog's detection. A simple formality." Martin swallowed. "Of course," he murmured, remembering how ironically he'd been the first passenger to complain about the dog. Now he stood prepared to vouch for its heroics. Fate had a sense of humor. As the group trooped off the plane, down a side ramp leading into a restricted area of the airport, Martin noticed Olivia's shoulders quivering slightly. The adrenaline must be wearing off, and her PTSD might be stirring. The shepherd must have felt it too. It bumped her leg gently, muzzle lifted. Olivia paused in a corridor, rummaging for that small pill container. Martin stepped closer with concern. "You okay?" She nodded, forcing a tight smile. It's a lot. Even with the dog I feel the weight of all these eyes on us, the fiasco on board." Martin gave a consoling nod. "Take your time, everyone can wait a minute." The dog's harness beeped once softly, likely a stress reading on Olivia's vitals. She shut it off, gulping her med. Agent Clark, noticing, signaled the officers to give them a moment. This small scene hammered home once more that while the dog served official functions, its emotional support to Olivia was equally vital. Martin felt an unexpected pang of empathy for a woman juggling professional demands with hidden scars. Outside the security checkpoint, a cluster of cameras and local reporters hovered, restricted by a roped-off area. They likely sensed a story. Suspect in custody, chemical item discovered, and a rumored FBI operation. The flight attendant signaled that some passengers had already recounted the dog's heroic detection. Martin heard a snippet from an officer. "They'll want a statement from the Bureau, possibly from the dog's handler, if permitted." Clark frowned. "We typically keep these ops low profile." But the swirl of watchers implied a brewing media scene. Olivia looked uneasy at the notion of cameras in her face. The shepherd whined softly, picking up her tension. Martin, a mere civilian, hovered in sympathy. He guessed the FBI might whisk them away discreetly or risk a public interview. The question, would they let the dog's public hero status overshadow the official secrecy? Another subtle confrontation loomed, to highlight the canine's success or to remain tight-lipped. In that swirl of tension, Martin found himself volunteering to talk to any local news who demanded a civilian statement, relieving the dog's handler from the spotlight. "I can confirm what happened from a passenger's perspective," he told Clark. "And, well, it might overshadow my earlier complaint about the dog." He grimaced at the irony. But if it saved Olivia from stepping into a media frenzy, he was willing. The agent eyed Martin, nodding eventually. "That might help. Keep it factual, no mention of deeper FBI procedures." So it was decided. They approached the terminal's side exit. Indeed, a small gaggle of reporters tried to surge forward, microphones ready. The dog bristled, pressing to Olivia's leg, unimpressed by the chaos. Clark shielded them, but nodded for Martin to speak if needed. Ms. Reyes, the flight attendant, had also joined, prepared to confirm the dog's role from a cabin crew perspective. The suspect was hustled through another door, flanked by 2 officers away from the cameras. The battered Contraband fiasco ended, but the labyrinth of post-flight statements began. As Martin stepped out under the overhead lights, cameras flashed. A local news anchor began a volley of questions. "Sir, is it true a service dog uncovered explosives on board? Was there a bomb threat?" Martin inhaled, ready to clarify. "No bomb, but the dog did detect contraband and suspicious chemicals. Thanks to the dog, we all stayed safe." Another question soared. "Did the dog subdue a violent passenger?" Martin cast a glance at the dog, tail wagging mildly behind Agent Clark and Olivia, feeling a wave of gratitude. "Yes, in a sense, it prevented harm. We owe a lot to that canine." The atmosphere crackled with excitability, fueling the final approach to the flight's conclusion. In the wings, the FBI quietly orchestrated their next moves, ensuring the dog and its handler avoided undue media glare, whisking away the suspect. Martin felt the entire saga pivot on these last minutes. How the public perceived the incident, how the dog's unstoppable loyalty was recognized, and how the flight's tension would finally unravel in each passenger's memory. Though the greatest hurdles were presumably behind them, the emotional and professional ramifications still loomed. One last confrontation with the cameras and questions, then each would leave to process the flight that tested their assumptions, their composure, and proved a dog's quiet heroism can overshadow any petty inconveniences. Airfield lights shimmered across the rain-streaked tarmac as the FBI agent, Olivia Sayers, and the German Shepherd slipped away from the swarm of cameras with Martin close behind. While some reporters managed to hound the flight attendant and a few cooperative passengers for sound bites, Agent Clark insisted on a discreet exit for the dog and its handler. The suspect had already been escorted to a secure holding area, and the questionable canister was whisked off to a lab for urgent analysis. Thus, with the plane's ordeal over, the final puzzle pieces awaited arrangement. Escorted by a pair of uniformed officers, the small group found an unused conference room in the airport's restricted zone, quiet but for the hum of overhead fluorescence. Olivia sank into a plastic chair, the shepherd at her feet, tail sweeping the floor. Martin felt an odd surge of protectiveness, as if wanting to shield them from the glare of outside curiosity. Clark spoke in hushed tones into a phone, presumably debriefing a superior about the flight's events. Martin hovered near the door, not sure if he should depart or remain. Eventually, Olivia offered a faint smile, gesturing for him to sit. "We might need your final statement," she said softly. "And—" she paused, stroking the dog's ears. "Thanks for stepping up back there, explaining to those reporters. I'm not good with cameras." Martin cleared his throat. "You're welcome. I was just returning the favor, after all your dog did. And how I acted earlier," he added, shame flickering. Olivia's grateful nod dissolved the awkwardness. Agent Clark, finishing his call, approached. He studied Martin for a moment, then gave a curt nod. "We appreciate your cooperation." The suspect's contraband was indeed illegal, but not lethal. The bigger question remains about that canister. We suspect it might be stolen industrial chemicals or unlicensed research samples. He pocketed his phone. "Either way, we avoided a potential hazard." Martin shuddered at the thought. "So the dog basically kept us from carrying who knows what into the city." Clark's thin-lipped expression confirmed it. "Precisely. Good thing it signaled us, or we'd be ignorant until who knows when." Then his gaze fell on the shepherd with a hint of admiration. "She's proven her worth time and again." Meanwhile, the German shepherd exhaled a soft breath, muzzle resting on Olivia's knee. The hush in the conference room gave them a rare moment of introspection. Without the chaos of the flight or the eyes of the public, Martin watched the dog's quiet devotion. Each time Olivia's posture stiffened from lingering adrenaline, the dog nudged her thigh, reminding her to breathe. Martin, once a staunch critic, felt an overwhelming sense of awe at the synergy between woman and dog. Neither flamboyant nor loud, but a gentle, vital partnership that anchored them both. A swirl of empathy lit in Martin. He realized that beyond the logistical tasks, spotting contraband, diffusing tension, the dog also served as an emotional lifeline for Olivia. In a sense, the flight's entire drama had brought this synergy into public view, unveiling how trivial seat comfort was next to a life-and-death detection skill and the unwavering emotional support that saved more than one soul. Moments later, an airport official arrived with forms for Martin, Olivia, and Clark to fill. Standard statements, describing the dog's detection, the suspect's reaction, the canister's location. Martin gave a subdued but thorough account of events, from his initial frustration up to the final confrontation. He stumbled a bit, confessing he'd been upset about the dog initially. The official, a tired-eyed woman, only nodded sympathetically, likely used to hearing varied passenger perspectives. She thanked him for clarifying how the dog's presence prevented potential panic or worse. For Olivia, the official forms included a specialized release verifying that her multi-role service dog had legitimate reason to be on the flight. She quietly recounted her own stress and how the dog's medical alert feature kicked in mid-flight. Martin listened, impressed by her calm honesty, balancing privacy about her PTSD with enough detail to justify the dog's presence. Agent Clark added a final layer of confirmation, referencing internal FBI guidelines for traveling with an advanced K9 on official business. As each signature finalized, an unspoken question loomed. What now? The swirling media outside wanted a deeper scoop. The suspect awaited charges, and the canister's composition remained unknown. For Martin personally, the flight ended in profound humbling, realizing the dog had a rightful place on planes, overshadowing any petty inconvenience. For Olivia, a wave of relief mixed with the usual swirl of PTSD come down, aided by the dog's comforting presence. For the dog itself, the mission concluded, but who knew what fresh tasks might lie ahead? The official gave them clearance to exit discreetly. "We suggest you depart through a side staff corridor if you want to avoid reporters," she said, eyeing Martin pointedly, aware he'd given a short statement already. Clark nodded. "We'll do that. We prefer to keep the dog from another camera blitz." A brief hush weighed on them, as though each recognized that the end of this ordeal hinged on a final step, stepping out into the city, changed forever by the flight's revelations. Thus, they rose, dog leading the way. Martin trailed behind, carrying a subdued sense of wonder. The hush in the corridor gave him time to reflect. Had it only been hours since he boarded the plane, full of frustration? Now, he felt not just gratitude, but a subtle spark of admiration for the FBI's specialized K9 program, and a pang of respect for Olivia's quiet struggles. All overshadowed the old seat comfort complaint he once fixated on. In the next minutes, they'd slip past the curious throng, retrieving any checked luggage, then scatter to separate destinies, the FBI returning to official duties, Olivia and the dog continuing their routine. Martin left to process a memory that would follow him for life. The final reveal of the canister's lab results might not matter to him personally, but the flight's emotional conclusion remained poised on the edge. A dog that saved them from potential peril, forging a new perspective on empathy, duty, and humility. Lessons Martin would carry beyond the airport doors. A subdued hush lingered in the airport's back corridor as Martin, Olivia, the FBI agent, and the German shepherd prepared to leave. They'd just completed their final statements regarding the suspect, the contraband, and the mysterious canister. Outside, the storm's drizzle misted the windows with tiny beads, reflecting the terminal's fluorescent lights. Tension from the flight still clung to them like static. In just a few hours, they'd uncovered 2 threats and prevented a mid-air confrontation from escalating beyond control. Agent Clark led the way, quietly instructing everyone to follow a security officer down a service hallway, away from the crowd of reporters. The suspect was already in custody, en route to further questioning. Meanwhile, local law enforcement had quarantined the suspicious canister in a lab for urgent testing. The wave of relief at surviving the flight's drama mingled with uncertainty about what the final lab results might reveal. Martin, once again, walked behind the shepherd, feeling both dwarfed by the FBI presence and oddly protective of the dog that had done so much. Olivia, still pale from adrenaline and her own PTSD triggers, clutched the canine's harness handle. The dog walked calmly, scanning the corridor, as though remaining in full work mode until officially debriefed. Martin admired how seamlessly it seemed to toggle between detection, restraint, and therapy support, reflecting a bond with Olivia deeper than any job description. The hush of footsteps echoed off sterile walls. Just when it seemed they'd bypassed the main concourse, a small knot of persistent reporters appeared around a bend, apparently tipped off to the group's location. Cameras flashed, microphones thrust forward. "Agent! Ma'am!" Did the dog truly find explosives on that flight? Are passengers safe? The questions pelted them. Martin saw Miss Reyes, the flight attendant, had also been cornered. She was trying to wave them off politely. Agent Clark tensed, posture rigid, but made no move to push them physically away. He recognized the line between official secrecy and freedom of the press. The German shepherd froze, ears flicking. The bright camera lights and frantic voices pressed on Olivia's nerves. Martin felt her grip the harness handle more tightly, chest rising with anxious breaths. The dog let out a low whine, sensing her stress. Concerned, Martin stepped forward, raising a hand. "Easy, everyone, calm down. No one's in danger." The dog prevented any real crisis. "Sir, who are you?" A reporter pivoted, camera lens pivoting to Martin. He forced a level tone. "Just a passenger. I can confirm the dog found contraband and suspicious items. Thanks to this dog, we landed safely." More cameras turned his way, leaving Olivia and the dog partially shielded. Agent Clark, seeing an opening, guided Olivia aside, letting her breathe. The dog exhaled, pressing close to her, mitigating the swirl of intrusive cameras. At that moment, a hush fell in Martin's mind. He realized the dog's silent presence might be the only thing keeping Olivia from a meltdown under PTSD pressure. He glimpsed her trembling fingers wrap in the dog's fur. The canine sniffed her face, a gentle anchor. Martin recalled earlier plane scenes, her small medication routine, the dog's discreet alerts. The synergy was undeniable, forging clarity. The dog wasn't just a security tool, but a living guardian for her mental well-being as well. A wave of empathy coursed through him. He turned back to the cameras, raising his voice over their clamor. "Look, I don't have all the details, but the bottom line, this dog is a multi-role service animal. It helps its handler medically, and it also works with the FBI for advanced detection. It found contraband mid-flight, possibly prevented a bigger threat. Isn't that enough to say we owe it gratitude?" The abrupt sincerity in Martin's words seemed to stun the reporters. Their barrage softened, turning from sensational questions to more respectful queries. At the apex of tension, the dog's achievement became public knowledge in a wave of camera flashes and quick interviews. Mrs. Reyes, stepping up, confirmed the dog's role in detecting a suspicious passenger and calming the cabin. Some travelers chimed in from behind the roped barrier. "It saved us all," or "I was on that flight, heroic dog." Applause and cheers rippled. Agent Clark, though typically stoic, allowed a modest nod of acknowledgement. Olivia, tears threatening, mouthed a silent "thank you" to Martin for diverting the brunt of the media frenzy. In that swirl, the dog remained calmly at attention, tail wagging in small arcs. Thunder rumbled outside, a final note from the receding storm. Martin felt his chest tighten with an emotional wave. This dog, once a target of his frustration, had become the flight's indisputable hero, bridging law enforcement, therapy, and conflict resolution in one single journey. If he'd had his way at the start, complaining to staff about the dog's presence, who knew how events might have spiraled? For an intense 15 minutes, flashbulbs and chaotic questions soared, culminating in a final moment of unity. A local official quickly stepped in, praising the FBI's dog, commending the flight crew, ensuring no further danger existed. The vantage under those bright terminal floodlights felt surreal, like an unscripted stage performance. At last, the official guided the entire group deeper into restricted corridors, away from the cameras. People parted with murmurs of, "Thank you, amazing dog, we owe you one." In the corridor's calmer space, Martin exhaled, posture sagging with relief. The dog turned to him, tail wagging lightly, as if acknowledging his part in deflecting the media frenzy. Olivia, swallowing tears, whispered, "I didn't think I could handle that crowd." She gave the shepherd a heartfelt pat, then offered Martin a shaky grin. "You rescued us from the cameras, like a sidekick to our hero dog." Martin's cheeks warmed, a half laugh escaping. "Guess that's the least I could do." Though more formalities awaited, further debriefs, possibly a quiet commendation for the dog, this press-laden moment felt like the flight's emotional apex. Martin realized he'd changed irreversibly, no longer a man who raged at an animal's presence, but someone who recognized the dog's indispensable role. The FBI agent, though busy on calls, slipped Martin a card, murmuring, "In case you have more to share or need follow-up." Martin tucked it away, nodding. The plane's crisis had ended, but its lessons lingered. Thus, the entire journey soared to a triumphant close in that battered corridor, the dog's quiet panting overshadowing the last echoes of thunder. They had faced contraband, discovered suspicious chemicals, quelled a suspect's outburst, and turned a potential meltdown into a near-heroic narrative. And under the bright lights of the waiting cameras, the dog's unwavering loyalty shone as the abiding fact. Sometimes, the seats we resent losing are overshadowed by the greater gifts an animal's presence can bring. A final truth Martin would carry well beyond this flight, forging new empathy, and a vow never again to underestimate the quiet guardians at our side. Outside the airport's restricted corridor, the swirling rain had eased to a mere drizzle. Night's darkness pierced by rows of glowing runway lights. Martin, Olivia, the German shepherd, and Agent Clark emerged from the labyrinth of hallways, each feeling the weight of the flight's events and the media's abrupt spotlight. The adrenaline that had kept them alert through contraband busts, hidden chemicals, and a near onboard confrontation slowly drained, leaving them weary but relieved. A small cluster of exhausted passengers, those required to give statements, gathered in a roped-off corner of the terminal. Some recognized the German shepherd with a hush of admiration, whispering about how it had saved the flight from potential chaos. Others simply thanked the dog with a nod or a soft-spoken "good job." Relief etched into their faces. Martin noticed a shift in the typical post-flight atmosphere. No frantic scrambles for luggage, no jockeying for the best rideshare. Instead, subdued unity and gratitude bound them. The strange ordeal had knit them together in ways few commercial flights ever experience. Agent Clark parted ways, briefly shaking Martin's hand with a polite, "Thank you for your cooperation." The suspect, still in custody somewhere, was someone else's responsibility now. The suspicious canister headed to a specialized lab. Clark assured them all that official investigations would continue, but the immediate threat had passed. Martin nodded, returning a tight smile, aware that this entire chapter, wild as it was, concluded for him with the flight's end. Olivia lingered near the row of seats, shoulders sagging as the final post-flight statements wrapped up. The dog, harness beep now silent, had relaxed into a normal posture, tail occasionally wagging at passers-by, who offered admiring glances. Under fluorescent airport lighting, Olivia's exhaustion showed clearly. Dark shadows under her eyes, posture weighed by both her PTSD and the night's tension. Yet she offered the dog a pat, whispering, "We did it." Another flight done. Martin hesitated, uncertain if he should simply slip away or express the gratitude welling inside him. Summoning courage, he approached, clearing his throat. "Thank you. Truly. Your dog changed everything for us, and I'm sorry again for how I acted at first." The corners of Olivia's mouth lifted in a soft, sincere smile. "No hard feelings. You were just protecting your comfort. Now you see why we do what we do." Martin nodded, a flush creeping over his cheeks at the memory of complaining about seat space, when, in truth, the dog had protected them from far greater harm. The dog, seemingly oblivious to the swirl of bureaucratic aftermath, sniffed Martin's pant leg with polite curiosity, then nudged him as if to accept his apology. Emboldened, Martin offered a gentle pat on its neck, ruffling the thick fur near the harness strap. He recalled how the dog had remained calm through every crisis, sniffing out contraband, discovering suspicious chemicals, and even preventing the suspect's final outburst from escalating. It was a testament to training, yes, but also the dog's innate loyalty, bridging fear and tension with unwavering devotion. Seeing the dog's dark eyes, Martin felt a deep sense of humility. This dog was never just an inconvenience, it was our guardian. He marveled at how swiftly perspective can shift when confronted with real danger. His own flight agenda had ended the moment they'd hit the tarmac, but the emotional journey lingered. The arrangement to exit the terminal discreetly appealed to him, especially with the small media throng outside baggage claim. Martin declined to speak further to reporters. He'd said enough, praising the dog's role. Let the official statements fill the headlines. He simply wanted a quiet exit from the airport, carrying lessons he'd never forget. In a final gesture, Martin asked Olivia if he could keep in touch. "I'd love to know how your missions go, or if the dog is recognized for its heroics." Olivia, though guarded, seemed touched. "Sure, I can give you a bureau contact," she said, scribbling a number. "We travel often, but updates happen." The dog sniffed the paper, as if acknowledging the new bond. Martin managed a grin. "I guess this flight made me see service dogs in an entirely new light. I'll be telling my family about a certain unstoppable German shepherd." Moments later, a black SUV with tinted windows pulled up beyond the security checkpoint, awaiting Olivia, the dog, and Agent Clark. With a final wave, they stepped through a staff-only door, the dog's vest catching a glint of overhead light. Martin stood there alone, the swirl of airport foot traffic easing back into its usual hum. A wave of emptiness struck him. That flight and everything that happened felt dreamlike. He pinched himself, scanning the near-empty gate area. Indeed, in less than 24 hours, he'd gone from complaining about a dog on a plane to respecting it as an integral piece of specialized FBI gear and a personal lifeline for Olivia. As Martin headed to the standard arrivals area, dragging his carry-on behind him, an older couple who recognized him from the flight approached. The man gave a firm handshake. "Heard you praising that dog to the cameras. Good on you." "Hard to believe we almost sat in judgment of it, huh?" Martin exhaled a half-laugh, nodding. "Yeah, definitely taught me not to jump to conclusions." In that fleeting exchange, he felt the final puzzle piece of the flight's experience slot into place. People can judge or misunderstand something crucial, but crises reveal truths that overshadow petty discomfort. Outside the main entrance, the drizzle had ceased, leaving wet pavement gleaming under streetlights. Martin inhaled the cool air, savoring the simpler tension of just catching a ride home. A swirl of relief and introspection welled up. So much can happen on a single flight. He recalled how a dog's presence had triggered him, only for that same dog to preserve everyone's safety. He reflected on Olivia's quiet strength, reliant on the dog for more than one reason. He felt a renewed vow to approach future events with empathy, acknowledging hidden struggles and unseen heroics. Stepping onto the sidewalk, Martin signaled a taxi. As he sank into the seat, the city lights gliding past, he realized this ephemeral chapter of Flight 214 had irrevocably changed him. He wouldn't soon forget the German shepherd's calm gaze, the beep of its sensor, Olivia's trembling hand, or Agent Clark's stern vigilance. Each moment underscored how illusions of personal inconvenience vanish in the face of genuine crises, and how quiet guardians, be they a well-trained K9 or a weary agent, can shift the fate of an entire plane. As the taxi merged into traffic, Martin closed his eyes. The flight, though ended, reverberated in him like an echo of thunder after a storm, a subtle promise that next time he encountered a service dog or any unfamiliar presence, he'd remember. Behind every harness or vest lies a story of unwavering duty, unstoppable loyalty, and the silent potential to save lives, even at 30,000 feet. Thank you for traveling with us through this extraordinary flight, where a misunderstood dog proved its valor in ways that surpass everyday perceptions. If you were moved by this story of evolving perspectives, hidden heroics, and unity under crisis, We invite you to subscribe to our channel for more emotional narratives celebrating compassion and resilience. Share this video with friends or family. Together, we can spread awareness of the incredible role service animals play in protecting and uplifting lives. Stay tuned for our next tale, where empathy and courage once again meet in the most unexpected places. Safe journeys to all.